Welcome to Tattoo Tabletop. My name is James, and today we are painting Commissar's Duty, a special edition Commissar from Games Workshop. That was my Red Bull, but let's get started. So, as we all know, I'm going to start dispensing it now, but we know what it is. It's Vallejo Model Color White, and we're starting off with a slap chop. Who could have seen it coming? Other than all of you who have watched my videos before, which again, thank you for that. So we're just going to start with a nice little slap chop dry brush here. So again, you don't need to be too neat about this. This is all about picking out definitions. So we're also doing it on the coat so that it gives it texture and so that we know which areas are raised, which are recessed, things of that nature. So we're just going to start dry brushing all over the model, pick out those details. Next, we're going to hop on to Army Painter Speed Paint Satchel Brown. The speed paints have actually become some of my favorites, but the main reason we're doing this is to actually pick out the belt, the book, the pouches, anything that would have any sort of brown associated to it. Now, I know what you're saying. Don't put speed paint on your web palette. Well, I do it anyway because, well, I'm simple like that. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So we're just going to start picking out those details. We're going to start with the holster of his other pistol. That's actually a good question. Why does he backup pistol? Who knows? Anyway, we're just going to start taking that Satchel Brown. We're going to start applying it nice and carefully all over everything. Again, if we make any sort of mess, most of the areas around where the brown is going to be black, so it would get covered up anyway. But, we're still just going to take our time, make sure that we, get everything set up the way we like it, make sure that the areas that are darker, the areas that are lighter, and we're just going to carry on with that. You know how many of you aren't subscribed to this channel? It's staggering numbers. You're getting an A+ in not being subscribed. So, go down there and hit that subscribe. It's completely free. And if you want to, hit a like. That would also be nice. All right, and so this is what we should have. And also I decided to paint his skin tone with a darker skin tone. So we also covered his face and his hands. As you can see, I missed that hand back there, but just don't miss the hand. Don't be me. So you see that we already got some definition, which is really nice, but now it's time to get the coat. And what is a good Commissar unless they're wearing a nice dark grim black coat? Now I'll bring up the paint here shortly, but either way, we're just going to start covering this with the Grim Black Army Painter Speed Paint 2.0. So we're just going to work our way around with it. Now, as you can see, it's kind of acting a little goofy. It might have been I didn't give it enough of a shake or something like that, but just make sure that you spend enough time with any sort of speed paint, contrast, anything like that, that you're moving the moisture, that you're moving the fluid in the correct areas, that's not pooling in the areas you don't want it, that it's settling nicely into those recesses and doing what you need it to do. But this is what it should look like once it's kind of dry, and now we're going to start picking out some of the red details, which includes the bolter casing and everything like that. But we're going to start dark. We're going to start with Berserker Red by 2 thin coats. Why are we starting darker? Because we want to have space to build up the color. So I'm just going to start with the collar here. We're just going to cover this in a nice blurry Berserker Red. I'm so sorry about that, but admittedly, I was also filming this at a paint night at my local friendly game store. So every once in a while the camera shakes, as you probably noticed. At some point I'm going to figure out my life, but until such time, we're just going to keep carrying on with it anyway. So we're just going to cover all the details, which includes his cuffs, the bolter casing, his lapel, I think is what that would be, the inside of his coat there where it folds out. And you're just going to cover all this with Berserker Red. All right, next up we're going to pick up Deep Gray from the Army Painter Fanatics line. This is going to be for very specifically, we're just going to do this on the skull for right now. The skull's on his hat and his chest piece. I had really bad footage on it, so I just covered it, but we're going to highlight immediately with Vallejo Model Color White. So just jumping straight onto it, just make sure that you've got it to a nice thin consistency, but also enough where you're going to be able to pick out raised edges where it's not too watered down. As you can see, I'm kind of just lightly, moving the brush across the raised details. So then that way it's just picking out those raised areas without being too aggressive. I want to be able to pick out the wings, the eye sockets and everything around them so that they look detailed without the paint just immediately falling into the recesses and ruining that extra detail. So it might take some practice, it might take a little bit of time, but like I said, just take your time. This step is really going to pop the miniature very, very nicely. So just take your time, move it nice and easily across, and you'll get there. And that's about what that should look like with those details popped, which is super, super nice. But now we're going to move on to Oak Brown. The reason we're moving on to Oak Brown is because we're just going to pick out a few final details, brown details there. So this includes his hands, fingers, things of that nature. Now, we've already done the Satchel Brown, but in this particular case, I'm using it to clean up his fingers. I noticed that it didn't come out the way that I wanted it to, so I just real quick brought out the Oak Brown to clean up the fingers and a few of those details. But immediately, we're going to move our way on to... Oh God, I know I forgot it. Why did I forget it? Yes, Onyx Skin. That's right. So this is the highlight level for that, and we're going to use this specifically for the skin on the hands, on the face, and any sort of other... I mean, that's the only revealed skin. So we're just going to take our time. We're going to pick out specific areas. So as you can see, I'm moving very carefully across the hands and across the face. Just a little boop on the nose, and just picking out the lip and stuff like that. For those of you who have struggle painting faces, this is where you really want to take your time. Just, again, same thing like with the skull before. Just move your finger across nice and easily, and you'll pick out those details. So that's what that should look like once you get through that. And I also picked out some of the dirt on the ground while I was at it. So next we're going to pick out the purity seals, or any of the parchment, which is going to be with Vallejo medium brown, or deep, I think it's medium gray, which is super weird, but it's definitely tan. It's probably one of my default colors. You can always use Screaming Skull. You could use or Xandri Dust, anything that's got that nice, paper-like consistency. But should be a really quick step. Just the book, just the purity seal, easy peasy, and on to the next one. So for this next step, as you can see, the coat is a little bit glossy, which we will address in a little bit. It's not a step that I filmed, but first things first that we're going to do is we're going to actually start highlighting up. I forgot to actually bring up the bottle, but essentially we are just going on to 2 thin coats, specifically Sanguine Scarlet. And this is what we're going to use to pop up the highlights on the red. So we're just going to take our time, and as you can see, I'm not covering the entirety of the lapel because I want to add that extra layer of definition. I want it to have some sort of framing to the red, and that's why I'm using the paint the way I am. But I'll take my time, get through the lapel, get through the bolter casing, and get through the collar and everything like that, and eventually you'll get to this lovely result. Next, we're moving on to the gold. Again, Dragon's Gold. Still one of my absolute favorite paints of all time. And so this is going to be specifically for any of the gold details, which includes the handle on the sword. It's going to be the tassels on the shoulder. All the good stuff. All the good stuff. So, very important. This is all about angles. As you can see, I chose one of my fine-tipped fine-tipped brushes. And I'm just angling the model specifically so that I'm picking up the raised areas. So that way it leaves the black in between there and just really adds that extra layer of definition. You're going to want to thin the paint down nicely, let it flow, but also not so much that it flows into those recesses. So in that way, when you get to the end, you have a nice popped result like this. As you can see, I also freehanded some stuff on the book. That's for later. Now we're going to move on to yellow. Yellow, which is such an infamous color, but Demonic Yellow from the Army Painter has you covered. Look at this. Watch it. Look at how easily that just covered all that with so little fuss. It truly miracles, because honestly, painting yellow is the bane of my existence, but to be able to just whip this out and cover a nice bright yellow nice and easy like that is super, super fantastic. But next, we're on to one of the last steps. Plate mail metal. Tongue twister, isn't it? So this is going to be picking out all the metallic bits. So we have the sword that's plunged into the earth. We have the bolter, the rest of the, hand bolter and stuff like that. So just make sure you got it nice and thin. Take your time. Pick out the final details. You're on the last step. Just take your time and have some fun with it. Some of this might take 2 coats depending on how well you thin it and stuff like that. But like I said, take your time, work through the details, pick out the individual things. And honestly, this is one of my favorite aspects of what I would kind of consider more of my painting style is oftentimes I don't use washes. I often will just paint something completely black and then I'll pick out the details. As you can kind of see here, like we have the handle of his other pistol. I paint that, just real quick like that. I make sure I take the time to get little details that, you normally miss, like the belt buckle on his belt that would be coming around his trench coat. And then when I get onto the bolter, I take my time and I pick out some of the very specific details on the bolter. I'm not just covering it all in metal. You can if you want to and then just use a wash after, but I really like the kind of comic book-esque style that it brings out, where it just has that hard definition, that hard line between them. So in that way, it just adds that extra level of pop to the miniature, in my opinion. So I just take my time, right here on the case, right there, I just move my brush in such a way that I'm only picking up some of those specific areas and just taking my time to make sure that I get the details that I want to cover, to be metal and, get the recesses left as black. And here is kind of what we're looking at. And that's the final product. So let me know what you think down in the comments down below. I added some blood effects on the sword there, dripping down into the rock. I had picked up a few more details, but what do you think? Here are a couple stills of the miniature. I included, I even kind of edged up some of the spots on the cloak and the trench. You don't need to do that. You can actually just keep that going. But I've been Tattoo Tabletop. Now, Commissar's orders, go paint something.